Welcome to Hidden History and Odyssey Through Time. I'm your host, John Rodriguez, and welcome to the best history podcast in New York State. This is episode 33 of the podcast, and the title of this episode is Undaunted Courage, Ultimate Sacrifice, Osmond K. Ingram, American hero of the First World War. Tensions had been brewing throughout Europe, especially in the troubled Balkan region of Southeast Europe, for years before World War I actually broke out. The spark that ignited World War I was struck in the country of Bosnia, where Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was shot to death along with his wife Sophie by the Serbian nationalist Gavrilo Princip on June 28, 1914. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand set off a rapidly escalating chain of events. Austria-Hungary, like many countries around the world, blamed the Serbian government for the attack and hoped to use the incident as justification for settling the question of Serbian nationalism once and for all. Because Serbia had the support of mighty Russia, Austria-Hungary waited to declare war until its leaders received word from German leader Kaiser Wilhelm II that Germany would support their cause. On July 5, 1914, Kaiser Wilhelm secretly pledged his support, giving Austria-Hungary a so-called carte blanche, or blank check, assurance of Germany's backing in the case of war. The dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary then sent an ultimatum to Serbia, with such harsh terms as to make it almost impossible to accept. Convinced that Austria-Hungary was readying for war, the Serbian government ordered the Serbian army to mobilize and appealed to Russia for assistance. On July 28, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, and the tenuous peace between Europe's great powers quickly collapsed. Within a week, Russia, Belgium, France, Great Britain, and Serbia, the Allies, had lined up against Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire, known as the Central Powers, and World War I had begun. When the United States finally entered World War I in April 1917 on the side of the Allies, the U.S. Navy joined the Allied navies in engaging German submarines, called U-boats, in the Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of England, France, Ireland, Spain, in the Mediterranean, and off the eastern coast of the United States. In October 1917, while off the coast of Ireland, one Navy destroyer was saved from total destruction thanks to an American hero named Osmond Kelly Ingram. In a remarkable display of courage and quick thinking, Osmond K. Ingram's actions also saved the lives of his shipmates at the cost of his own. 3 years after his death, Ingram would be awarded the Medal of Honor for extraordinary heroism in the presence of the enemy. Osmond K. Ingram's story, hidden history that has remained long forgotten, is the story of a war hero who sacrificed his life for the country he loved, and a war that marked the beginning of the use of unrestricted submarine warfare by the enemy. Osmond Kelly Ingram was born on August 4, 1887 in Oneonta, Alabama, the second of 4 sons born to Robert and Naomi Elizabeth Ingram. Robert was a local Methodist Episcopal preacher and a veteran of the American Civil War, fighting for the South. Osmond's maternal grandfather also fought for the Confederate Army during the Civil War, so it is safe to say that military service ran through Osmond's blood. 2 months before his 10th birthday, in June 1897, Osmond's father Robert passed away. By 1903, Osmond and his family were living in Pratt City, just outside of Birmingham, Alabama, and Osmond was about to make a life-changing decision. On November 24, 1903, at the age of 16, and with his mother's consent, Ingram enlisted in the U.S. Navy as a seaman apprentice. After completing his basic training in June 1904, Ingram served on a number of Navy vessels for the next few years. When his enlistment ended on August 3, 1908, Ingram was honorably discharged from the Navy and moved back to Pratt City, where he became a firefighter with the Birmingham Fire Department. He served with distinction with the fire department for a few good years, but the sea was calling him back. On August 6, 1913, 26-year-old Osmond K. Ingram re-enlisted in the U.S. Navy in Atlanta, Georgia, and was stationed aboard the USS Cassin by April 6, 1917. Ingram's enlistment ended May 6, 1917, but by that point, the United States had entered World War I, which had been ravaging Europe since 1914. And so Ingram re-enlisted the following day, May 7, 1917, and was once again assigned to the USS Cassin. Osmond K. Ingram had also rose through the ranks during his career in the Navy, and by May 1917, he had the rank of Gunner's Mate First Class. Before we continue with Ingram's story, let's talk a little bit about the start of World War I, since the United States officially entered the conflict in April 1917. On June 28, 1914, Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were assassinated by Bosnian Serb nationalist Gavrilo Princip. Austria suspected that Serbia was responsible. 1 month later, on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Historians will later mark this date as the start of World War I, also known as the Great War at the time, because as a result of Austria-Hungary declaring war on Serbia, in August 1914, other countries around the world got involved in the conflict. The First World War would see Austria-Hungary, Germany, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, known as the Central Powers, fighting against Great Britain, France, Russia, Japan, Belgium, and Italy, known as the Allied Powers. The United States declared its neutrality in August 1914, but would join the Allied Powers in April 1917. Although the United States was neutral, submarine warfare in the Atlantic Ocean kept tensions high. On May 7, 1915, Germany sunk the British ocean liner Lusitania, killing more than 120 U.S. citizens and provoking outrage in the United States. In 1917, Germany's attacks on American ships and its attempts to meddle in U.S.-Mexican relations finally drew the United States into the war on the side of the Allies. On April 2, 1917, President Woodrow Wilson went before a joint session of Congress to request a declaration of war against Germany. Wilson cited Germany's violation of its pledge to suspend unrestricted submarine warfare in the North Atlantic and in the Mediterranean, as well as its attempts to entice Mexico into an alliance against the United States, as his reasons for declaring war. In his speech, President Wilson, as usual, took the moral high ground and declared that not only had America's rights as a neutral country been violated, but that the world must be made safe for democracy. Wilson acknowledged that while there would be many months of fiery trial and sacrifice ahead of us, it was vital for Americans to fight for the rights and liberties of small nations, and to bring peace and safety to make the world itself at last free. On April 4, 1917, the U.S. Senate voted in support of the measure to declare war on Germany. The House concurred 2 days later, on April 6, 1917, and war against the Imperial German government was official. The United States later declared war on German ally Austria-Hungary on December 7, 1917. Within a few months, thousands of U.S. men were being drafted into the military and sent to extensive training. Women, even many who had never worked outside the home before, took jobs in factories producing supplies needed for the war effort, as well as serving in ambulance corps and the American Red Cross at home and abroad. Children were enlisted to sell war bonds and plant victory gardens in support of the war effort. The United States mobilized over 4 million troops to Europe, where they encountered a war unlike any other, one waged in trenches and in the air, and one marked by the rise of such military technologies as the tank, the field telephone, and poison gas. Thanks to new military technologies and the horrors of trench warfare, World War I saw unprecedented levels of carnage and destruction. By the time the war was over and the Allied powers had won, close to 20 million people, soldiers and civilians alike, were dead. Now that the United States had entered World War I, the US Navy joined the Allied navies in pursuing German submarines, called U-boats, in the Atlantic Ocean, off the coasts of England, France, Ireland, Spain, in the Mediterranean, and off the eastern coast of the United States. Besides warships, the Navy also utilized submarine chasers and submarines for anti-submarine warfare against the Germans. The most significant contribution of the US Navy during the Great War was the escort and transport of 2 million US soldiers to France, the great majority in the last 6 months of the war, with almost no loss to German submarines. This was accomplished with the significant assistance of the British Royal Navy. In April 1917, the USS Cassin was immediately prepared for overseas deployment and arrived at Queenstown, Ireland on May 17, 1917, with gunner's mate First Class Ingram aboard. The U.S. Cassin then began naval operations, which called for her to rendezvous with American troop convoys at sea and escort them to ports in England and France. On October 15, 1917, the USS Cassin sighted the German U-boat U-61 about 20 miles south of Minehead, Ireland, and pursued the enemy submarine. While the Cassin was searching for the submarine, Osmond K. Ingram noticed that the German submarine had fired a torpedo. Realizing that the torpedo was going to strike the ship's rear, where the depth charges were kept, Ingram ran towards the back of the ship with the intention of releasing the highly explosive charges into the water before the torpedo could reach the Cassin. Ingram began to hurl the depth charges overboard, but unfortunately, the torpedo struck the ship before he could complete his mission. It did indeed set off the depth charges in a blast that killed Ingram and blew him overboard into the sea. Although he was unable to release the entire load of depth charges before the torpedo hit, Ingram's courageous deed and sacrifice prevented the ship from being completely destroyed and saved many lives. The USS Cassin, her rudder blown off and stern extensively damaged after the attack, began to circle. This did not prevent Cassin, however, from firing 4 rounds at the German submarine when she spotted it. The submarine, discouraged from further attack, submerged and was not contacted again. Through the night, the USS Cassin was guarded by an American and 2 British destroyers, and in the morning, HMS Snowdrop took Cassin in tow for Queenstown. After repairs there and at Newport, England, the USS Cassin returned to escort duty on July 2, 1918. Osmond K. Ingram was the first Navy enlisted man to be killed in action during World War I. His body was never recovered. He was 30 years old. Osmond was survived by his mother, Mrs. Ingram, 60 years old, and 3 brothers, Ben, Paul, and Eugene. His name, along with those of 562 other missing men, is inscribed on a wall at the Brookwood American Cemetery and Memorial in Surrey, England. Two days after Osmond K. Ingram sacrificed his life for his country, on October 17, 1917, a reporter who worked for the Birmingham Age Herald, an Alabama newspaper, broke the news of Osmond's death to the sailor's brother, Ben Ingram of Pratt City. Afraid his mother would not take the news well due to her age, Ben called a doctor to accompany him to his mother's home, and together they broke the news as gently as possible. My boy, Mrs. Ingram sobbed, and that was all she could say. Only a mother could understand the pain and sorrow Mrs. Ingram felt, especially since Osmond's body was never recovered. A loving and caring son, Osmond would send his mother a letter every week while he was away, and every month he'd send her $30 of his pay, almost $800 today. The surviving crew members of the USS Cassin raised $502, which they sent to Ingram's mother as a small token of their love for her brave son. When he heard the news of Ingram's death, Captain W. L. McDonough of the Pratt City Fire Station, Birmingham Fire Department, had the following to say about Osmond: "There was never a braver lad." Osmond K. Ingram was indeed a brave lad, but eventually he would be another forgotten American hero of the First World War. It was in 1918 that the end of World War I was finally in sight. In October of that year, an armistice, or a truce, between the Ottoman Empire and the Allies ended fighting in the Middle East. Only days later, the disintegrating Austro-Hungarian Empire signed an armistice with Italy. Germany would be the final domino to fall. As the German army was close to collapsing, Germany was forced to pursue an armistice with the Allies. And this is the end of it. In 3 hours, the war will be over. It seems incredible even as I write it. I suppose I ought to be thrilled and cheering. Instead, I am merely apathetic and incredulous. There is some cheering across the river, occasional burst of it as the news is carried to the advanced lines. For the most part, though, we are in silence. With all is a feeling that it can't be true. For months we have slept under the guns. We cannot comprehend the stillness. Robert Casey of the 124th Field Artillery Regiment, 33rd Division, wrote these words on November 11, 1918. On that day, after more than 4 years of horrific fighting and the loss of millions of lives, the guns on the Western Front fell silent. Although fighting continued elsewhere, the armistice between Germany and the Allies on November 11, 1918 was the first step to ending World War I. The global reaction was one of mixed emotions: relief, celebration, disbelief, and a profound sense of loss. By the time World War I was over and the Allied powers had won, close to 20 million people, sailors and civilians alike, were dead. After the end of World War I, the post-war years saw a wave of civil rights activism for equal rights for African Americans, the passage of an amendment securing women's right to vote, and a larger role in world affairs for the United States. In December 1918, the USS Cassin, the ship Osmond K. Ingram saved from total destruction, received a well-deserved honor when she was chosen as one of the escorts for the USS George Washington, carrying President Woodrow Wilson to France, for his attendance at the Paris Peace Conference. This conference, which began in January 1919, was called to establish the terms of peace after World War I. Though nearly 30 nations participated, the representatives of the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Italy became known as the Big Four. The Big Four dominated the proceedings that led to the formulation of the Treaty of Versailles in June 1919, a treaty that ended World War I. On May 12, 1918, Secretary of the Navy Daniels announced that a ship would be named after Osmond K. Ingram, and in a January 11, 1919 letter, Daniels informed Ingram's mother that a new ship was to be named after her late son, the USS Osmond Ingram. Ingram became the first enlisted man in the U.S. Navy to have a ship named in his honor. In a letter dated November 11, 1920, the 2-year anniversary of the end of World War I, Osmond K. Ingram's mother was informed by Secretary of the Navy Daniels that her son would be receiving the Medal of Honor for services above and beyond the call of duty during the World War. The Medal of Honor is the United States' highest award for military valor in action. Osmond's mother, Naomi Elizabeth Ingram, passed away on August 11, 1923. In 1932, a local Birmingham park was renamed Kelly Ingram Park in honor of Osmond K. Ingram, and in 1967, Osmond's Medal of Honor and other medals he received for his service were donated to the Birmingham Museum of Art in Alabama by surviving family. In 2011, almost 100 years after his death, Osmond K. Ingram was inducted into the Alabama Military Hall of Honor. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you've learned something new today. Season 3 of Hidden History will explore the lives of veterans of the United States, as well as veterans of foreign countries historically connected to our nation. Many of their stories have been hidden in the pages of history and deserve to be told. Pictures, newspaper clippings, and links to external articles relating to a particular episode are available on our website, hiddenhistorypod.com. Thanks again for listening. I'm John Rodriguez, and until we meet again, this has been Hidden History and Odyssey Through Time.